Hello everyone and welcome to another movie review. I watched Mansfield Park from 1999 and it was interesting. Some things were very good and book accurate while others were bewildering to say the least. Should you want a refresher on the book, then feel free to check out my detailed plot summary. Link is in the description below or in the card above. But don't forget to come back because we need to talk about this. So without further ado, I think you should all strap in, make yourself some nice tea or hot chocolate, and let's get started. The movie opens on child Fanny Price as she's still living with her poor family. She's in bed with her sister Susan, telling her a story, when a carriage arrives to take her away as she's to go and live with her aunt and uncle at Mansfield Park. And we're only about a minute into the movie when we're introduced to the second major conflict of the story: slavery. Yep. So, on her way to Mansfield, Fanny's carriage passes the ocean where we see a ship just sitting there for some reason, and we hear some wailing coming from it. Fanny asks the coachman who's traveling with her about it, and he tells her that it is black cargo. It makes the very ominous statement that this is not going to be your average rom-com. Fanny's introduction to Mansfield Park was anything but positive. Her relatives greeted her with disinterest, with Sir Thomas making it clear to his daughters that Fanny wasn't one of them. Her second aunt, Mrs. Norris, literally dragged her around the house while giving her a tour, ending with the cold, drafty attic which was to be Fanny's room. As in the novel, Fanny was very sad, finding comfort in her cousin Edmund, who is nice to her. He gives her some writing paper, which she uses to write to her younger sister Susan back home, and not her brother William as in the book. William is, in fact, not in the movie at all. We then get a little montage of Fanny hanging out with Edmund as he's educating her, and the years go by. They play and they ride, and Edmund talks about Sir Thomas's slaves on his plantation in the Caribbean. I'm sorry for laughing, it's just so out of place to me. They do make sure to remind the viewer not to relax too much, as this movie is about slavery after all. Fanny writes regularly to her sister Susan back home, and this becomes like a narration in the movie. She writes that Sir Thomas and his eldest son Tom have gone to the plantation in the Caribbean, so they are temporarily out of the picture when the Crawfords arrive in Mansfield. The siblings, Mary and Henry Crawford, have rented the nearby parsonage for a limited time. They are not, in fact, guests of Mr. and Mrs. Grant as they are in the book. And they're quite devious from the moment of their arrival. Henry calls them all a dreary lot, right in front of their faces, which is rather funny. We then get the POV of the Crawfords as they discuss their first impressions of the Bertram family, and Henry admits to liking the two Bertram girls, Maria and Julia. But he likes Maria more simply because she's taken. Very strong villain vibes there. Maria's fiancé, Mr. Rushworth, was also present, but no one seems to care at all about him. They all go on to socialize a lot with the Crawfords, and Edmund and Mary are getting increasingly close. Then Tom returns home from Caribbean, and he brings with him his eccentric theatre friend, Mr. Yates. And soon enough, just like in the book, Yates inspires them all to set up a little amateur theatre right there at Mansfield Park. Fanny is extremely uptight about the whole thing, which suits her character in the book. But in the movie, they seem to have made her a lot more confident and active rather than passive, so to speak. And with that in mind, it feels out of character for her to judge the others for partaking in the play. And then we get to a very peculiar rehearsal scene. As in the book, both Mary Crawford and Edmund find their way to Fanny's room to ask for her help. In the book, this scene ends with Mary and Edmund rehearsing a love scene together, which Fanny finds really awkward. But in the movie, it is Mary and Fanny rehearsing it together in front of Edmund, and Mary holds Fanny's waist in a rather intimate manner. This is one out of a couple of scenes that I think borders on queerbaiting. I'm not really qualified to judge that though, it's just my impression. I just find it particularly strange in the movie as Fanny and Mary have hardly even interacted at this point. A couple of book accurate details here is that Lady Bertram often falls asleep, and Henry Crawford is very flirty with Maria Bertram behind the scenes. Mr. Rushworth mentions that he has 42 speeches, which I was very happy to see. I was afraid that they wouldn't include that, as he does mention it so frequently in the novel. Then Sir Thomas returns unexpectedly from the Caribbean and shuts the theatre down. So far, so good. But then the next day, we continue on the slavery narrative when Sir Thomas firmly cements himself as... Well, I don't even know what to say, as the words I want to use are ill-suited for my channel. He talks of his property, comparing them to mules, and talk of how the women especially are well-shaped. The weirdest thing about the scene is that it's the middle of the day. He's just having tea with his family. I would understand it more if it was some late-night smoky backroom with his like-minded landowner peers, over a little too much port perhaps. But, thankfully, both Edmund and Fanny stand up to him in his views. Sir Thomas seems to like this about Fanny and highlights how much she has improved. And there's a creepy undertone there for sure. But regardless, he decides to host a ball in her honor. And Fanny gets so upset by this, it's quite comical. She rushes off, and when Edmund follows her, she says,
"I won't be sold off like one of your father's slaves, Edmund."
And she takes her horse and she goes for a melodramatic, slow-motion ride in the rain. In the book, Fanny is honored by this gesture and welcomes Sir Thomas's newfound appreciation for her. But then again, book Sir Thomas and movie Sir Thomas are two entirely different characters. We then get a scene that is not in the book. Fanny is reading alone in the library and Henry Crawford joins her. He starts reading aloud to her and she enjoys it, but Maria is eavesdropping on them and gets jealous. After this, Maria seeks out her father, Sir Thomas, to speak about her fiancé, Mr. Rushworth. Sir Thomas, just like in the book, expresses his concern that she's not really that into him and offers her an out of the engagement. But Maria is angry with Henry and says that she wants to go through with the wedding. In the book, Henry has already left Mansfield Park, and that's Maria's reason for marrying, as she believes that Henry doesn't care about her. That's partly why Jane Austen's novels are so difficult to adapt to film, because you can't make changes without it affecting a whole chain reaction of events which occurs after. So in the book, Maria's reason for going through with the wedding is her feeling scorned by Henry. But changing it to still having Henry around creates a plot hole. And they fixed that plot hole by adding that library scene with Henry reading to Fanny, but I find it unrealistic that Maria would make such a rash decision based on such an innocent activity. I also don't understand why they have Maria seeking out her father about the engagement if she didn't have any plans on breaking it. That made no sense to me either. So, Maria and Rushworth get married and leave Mansfield Park, and younger sister Julia goes with them in their travels. So far, book accurate. Life then goes back to normal, and Fanny is out running errands for Mrs. Norris when she is caught in a rain shower. Mary then offers her shelter to wait out the rain with her, and she starts helping her out of her wet clothes. This is yet another one of those scenes where it feels like Mary might have had a thing for Fanny. The subject is quickly changed though, as Fanny starts talking about how Edmund is about to take orders to become a clergyman. This is the first time that Mary hears of this in the movie, and she makes her disapproval quite clear. In the book, however, she has known for a while, and it's been an ongoing argument between her and Edmund. Speaking of Edmund, he comes to collect Fanny, where Mary tells him plain and simple, that she thinks it's beneath him to become a clergyman. I like that Mary is portrayed as this go-getter who knows what she wants. I mean, she was in the book as well, but it's far more amplified in the movie. Then we get to the horrible, outrageous, not at all longed for ball. And Fanny seems to have forgotten all about her previous outburst and is enjoying herself. She even dances with Henry. Book accurate. After the ball, however, we get a scene where Henry meets Fanny in the stairwell. He tells her that he wants to be closer to her, but Fanny finds him ridiculous and tells him so. A little while later, Sir Thomas visits Fanny in her attic room, and he's shocked that she doesn't have a lit fire there, which is book accurate, although in the book it refers to the room where she usually spends her days and not her bedroom. Regardless, Sir Thomas reveals that Henry has asked for her hand in marriage before he had even asked her. This deviates quite a lot from the book, where not only does Henry ask her first, he had also just secured her brother a huge promotion. That was relevant to their relationship as it did help improve Fanny's view of him, whereas in the movie he hasn't really done that much other than flirt with her. As in the book, Fanny refuses, thus making Sir Thomas very disappointed in her. But rather than acting like a concerned parental figure, like book Sir Thomas did, he goes on to command her to marry him and is being very villain-like about it. Fanny just sits there and takes it, which is a big difference from book Fanny, who broke down crying as her uncle explained her selfishness and ingratitude. There is a huge difference in Fanny's character development here, because book Fanny is essentially a deeply insecure people pleaser. She fears being a disappointment to the relatives that have given her so much. Movie Fanny has been treated even worse than book Fanny, and despite this, she grew up to have a strong self-confidence, which I don't think is very realistic. The movie then gives us a little montage of Sir Thomas scolding Fanny every day. Even in front of the others, like during tea time with Mary Crawford present as well. Mary says that Fanny just needs time and that Henry loves her and will wait for her. But Sir Thomas is obstinate and says that a break from luxury is sure to set her mind straight. She is to go to her family in Portsmouth. So Fanny has some tearful goodbyes with Edmund and Mary, just like in the book. But the difference is that she goes to visit her family by her own accord, along with her brother William. So in the book, it's supposed to be a happy occasion, not a punishment for her rejecting Henry. Fanny then arrives in Portsmouth, and her family is surprised to see her. We see once again how rough their poverty is compared to Mansfield Park. Everyone is a bit disheveled and there are insects everywhere. Fanny seems shocked at how bad it was, as she probably didn't notice these things as much when she was last there at 9 years old. She has a happy reunion with Susan, which is the only sibling that she had had frequent correspondence with since moving away. But she cries in bed that night and Susan comforts her. She keeps a brave face as well as she can and tries to be of use to the family. At one point she gets a letter from Mary saying that Henry is missing her. They had been in London where they had met Maria and her new husband Rushworth. Maria had seemed very surprised to hear of Henry's proposal to Fanny. This is a nod to the previous jealousy she felt about Henry flirting with Fanny. And I can see how Maria would be shocked that Henry would sink so low as to want to marry a girl without a fortune. Fanny and her family wake up one morning by a messenger asking for Fanny Price. They then set off some fireworks and doves flying out from a basket. This scene is added for the movie and is supposed to be a gift from Henry. Henry then makes a surprise visit and comes up to the family after church one day. He and Fanny start walking in the harbour and they have a surprisingly candid conversation. Henry says that he knows that Fanny is in love with Edmund, which wasn't mentioned in the book, at least not so abruptly. You know, Jane Austen is the queen of subtlety. Henry then points out that Edmund will marry his sister Mary and is very persuasive. He also mentions that he knows that Fanny saw his insincere attentions towards Maria, but Fanny merely tells him that her heart is taken by another. This conversation is very different in the book. They talk mostly of his charities at his estate, and Susan is also with them the whole time, so it is more formal. Fanny then gets a letter from Edmund where he continues worrying about Mary's priorities, but he also admits that she is the only woman whom he can imagine himself marrying. Fanny gets sad, and Henry hugs her as they are out walking again. He's then invited to come and have dinner with her family, which did not happen in the book. When given the offer in the book, he politely declined, saying that he already had dinner plans. Book Fanny was a lot more ashamed of her family, and I think that he did that to spare her the embarrassment. But movie Henry keeps a good face despite the dirty cutlery and simple food, and Fanny seems to appreciate him for that. There's an interesting scene that night that wasn't in the book, and that is Fanny's mother, Mrs. Price, talking to her about that there's no shame in wealth, and that she had married for love, and look where that got her. So she's strongly hinting that she thinks Fanny should accept Henry. Fanny is then out walking with Henry again the next day, and she opens up to him a bit more, saying that poverty frightens her, which I think is the most honesty she had ever shown anyone, maybe aside from Edmund. Henry assures her that she can live in comfort with him and she accepts him. So they hug and kiss on the lips, which is very raunchy. But the next morning, Fanny wakes up with anxiety. Somehow. And when Henry comes over with flowers to see his love, she takes back her acceptance, saying that she still doubts him. This is a complete deviation from the book, as Fanny never accepts him there. Henry is justifiably upset and tells her that out of the two of them, she is the untrustworthy one. And he rushes out. I'm kind of inclined to agree with him there. Shortly after this, Edmund comes to Portsmouth to bring Fanny back to Mansfield Park. He tells her that Tom, his elder brother, is seriously ill and the family needs her. In the book, this is told through letters, but I don't mind this change. It makes sense. So off they go to Mansfield. Once they are back, they join the family in watching over Tom in his sick bed. Another change here is that Mary and Henry Crawford come to visit again to show their support, and there are some long, awkward glances between Fanny and Henry. But Fanny keeps herself busy by taking care of Tom, which is a little odd. I mean, this is a wealthy family. I'm sure they could afford to hire a nurse. Anyway, we get another movie-only scene here where Henry and Maria meet again. And she's still sulky about his attachment to Fanny, but he tells her that he's been rejected. This exchange would likely have happened in the book as well, only in another location, so I'm not mad at it. And then we get to a very uncomfortable scene. So, Fanny is cleaning up in Tom's room. Again, why hire a nurse when you can just use Fanny? And she finds a notebook with some really awful drawings in it of slaves being assaulted. It's very graphic, very disturbing. And this is when Sir Thomas comes up behind her and snatches the notebook from her hands. He tells her that his son Tom is mad for drawing that and dismisses her. He then rips the drawings out by the fire, presumably to burn them, and we never hear of this again. This is entirely made up for the movie and, again, very disturbing. We then move on to another controversial scene where Fanny walks in on Henry and Maria in bed together, doing the devil's tango. Poor Fanny is having a rough day. So she gets upset and runs off. But she runs into Edmund, and then he finds them too. Maria begs her brother not to judge her. She says that she's trapped in her marriage and Rushworth is a fool. It's fairly obvious that this is a movie-only scene. The next day, Fanny is back in Tom's sick room and Edmund comes in to comfort her. And they have an almost kiss moment, which is very strange. I mean, Tom is literally dying behind you, but you know, fine. I realize now that pretty much everything that happens at the end of the movie is a deviation from the book. Yeah. Mr. Rushworth then arrives at Mansfield Park along with a reporter who's going to write a piece on Rushworth's estate. So he's quite excited and is looking for his wife. She's nowhere to be found, however, and neither is Henry Crawford. This fact, along with the awkward looks of the rest of the family, is apparently enough for this reporter to understand that there must be something scandalous going on. So, of course, this ends up with a gossip article detailing the scandal between Mrs. Rushworth and Henry Crawford. In the book, this all happens off-page while in London, and both Fanny as well as the family found out about it through the papers. But I get it, it's not as dramatic as having poor Fanny literally walk in on them. The family is feeling very disappointed, and Mary Crawford, who is still there for some reason, gives her unsolicited advice on what to do. She says that they must convince Henry to marry Maria, and then, after an appropriate time of excommunication, they will be accepted back into the family. She also says that if Tom dies from his illness, then Edmund will be the heir to Mansfield Park. And basically tells the family not to interfere, to let nature take its course. And then finishes off by blaming everything on Fanny, which is the only thing here that is book accurate. Edmund then speaks up and calls her out for her insensitive nature, saying that he doesn't know her, and nor does he wish to. So Mary is now out of their lives as well as Henry. Maria did not get her wish to marry Henry though, as she went on to live with her aunt Mrs. Norris after her divorce from Rushworth. Tom's health returned, and eventually Edmund confessed his love for Fanny, and they kiss. Fanny's younger sister Susan moves in at Mansfield Park, and Julia, Maria's younger sister, is back home now and receives a letter from Mr. Yates, Tom's theatre friend. In the book, she actually eloped with Yates along the same time as the scandal between her sister and Henry occurred. So the movie is just trying to shoehorn that part in at the very last minute. At least they are suggesting that there is some romance going on between them. So to conclude the whole plantation business, Sir Thomas decided to abandon his pursuits in the Caribbean and went into the tobacco industry instead. As for Fanny, she of course married Edmund, and Edmund helped her find a publisher, and she was now to become a published author. And that's the end of it. So let's talk about it. In all fairness, the subject of slavery is not entirely irrelevant to Mansfield Park. As I was reading the book, the whole Sir Thomas's business in Antigua kept coming up, and I had to Google where that was. So it's definitely part of the context, even if the subject is not fully explored in the book. There is one scene where Fanny asks about the slave trade, and Sir Thomas doesn't answer her. Again, with Jane Austen's subtlety, we can interpret this in many different ways. But she did make it clear that Sir Thomas had a strong moral compass. He was far from the villain he was portrayed as in the movie. He's just a sweet old man who wants what's best for his family. Personally, I feel like the subject of slavery is out of place in the story. We never see any of Sir Thomas's dealings in Antigua, and we never even see a black character. In its essence, it's just a quirky story about a group of upper-class English people finding love. Adding this slavery conflict creates a tone issue, maybe even a genre break, and I just don't think it did the subject justice. If you're going to make the issue of slavery a conflict in the story, either have it as an anecdote like in the book, or make it the central plot. Reducing it into a side conflict seems to lessen the severity of the subject, especially when compared to the major plot, which is just mindless fluff, pretty much. I don't want to spend too long on this subject as it is very complex, but I felt like I had to mention it since it's such a prevalent part of the movie. So let's talk a little bit about the characters and casting, starting with Fanny herself. She's played by Frances O'Connor, and I quite liked her in the role. She doesn't stand out too much, which I think is perfect for a character like Fanny Price. She's supposed to be a bit of a wallflower. Pretty, yes, but still a wallflower. They did change her character into someone more confident and outspoken, which really doesn't suit her character, in my opinion. But yeah, I can understand the challenge of having a passive main character. I think the whole cast, all in all, were excellent, but my favorite was that of Hugh Bonneville as Mr. Rushworth. I was absolutely thrilled when he appeared on screen. Another one of my favorites was Victoria Hamilton as Maria Bertram, later Mrs. Rushworth. She definitely embodies that subtle entitlement that really suits the character. As for the setting, Mansfield Park itself, I was actually quite disappointed and confused. It's almost like they used several different houses for it, none of which looked alike, and it was also partially in ruins. It made no sense to me how a wealthy family such as the Bertrams would live like that. Yes, it's a huge mansion, but many of the walls are just exposed bricks. That might be modern in some places today, but there's no way that Sir Thomas wouldn't have had that fixed. But aside from that, Portsmouth was great, exactly what I imagined, and the parsonage was really cute too.
Oh, come here.
Overall, the movie wasn't great in my opinion. There were some gems, admittedly, but I cannot get past what they did to Sir Thomas. That was just too jarring for me. But I'm curious to know now what all of you think. The movie is available to watch right here on YouTube. I can link it for you below if you want to watch it, but don't forget to come back and give me your thoughts. If you enjoyed this video, then make sure to give me a thumbs up as I'll really appreciate that, and subscribe to the channel. Niles and I thank you so much for watching today, and we hope to see you back next time. Don't we? Stackars niście.